Stop doing this. Stop believing that the more you give, the more an avoidant will love you. Because some people can watch you move mountains for them and still walk away without looking back. Not because your love was small, but because your effort was never the thing they were loyal to. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you're going to understand the one thing avoidants protect above everything else. And once you see it, a lot of your confusion will disappear. Have you ever felt like the more you cared, the colder they became? If that's happened to you, comment freedom below, subscribe to the channel, and keep listening, because what you're about to hear may completely change how you see the person you've been satiating. One of the hardest truths to accept about avoidant people is that they do not measure relationships the way most people do. Most people think love is built through investment. You show up, you help, you support, you sacrifice, you listen, you stay. And naturally, you expect those things to create a deeper bond. That is how many healthy relationships grow. But when you are dealing with someone who is strongly avoidant, the equation often works differently. You think your effort creates closeness. They experience closeness as pressure. You think consistency creates safety. They experience too much emotional dependence as danger. You think giving more will make them appreciate you more. They often feel an urge to pull away. This is why so many people become trapped in a painful cycle. They keep increasing their effort because they believe effort is the missing ingredient. They become more patient, more understanding, more available, more forgiving. Meanwhile, the avoidant partner becomes increasingly distant, not because they hate the attention, not because they never cared, but because something else is happening beneath the surface. Something most people never see. You are trying to win their heart. They are trying to protect their independence. And when those two goals collide, independence usually wins. Think about that for a second. The thing you believe will save the relationship may be the very thing triggering their urge to escape it. Many people spend years trying to understand this contradiction. They say, I was good to them. I supported them through everything. I gave them space. I was loyal. I was patient. Why didn't it matter? The answer is uncomfortable, because what mattered most to them was not what mattered most to you. When someone is deeply avoidant, their highest loyalty is often not to the relationship. It is not to the sacrifices you made. It is not even to the love they receive. Their highest loyalty is to maintaining a sense of emotional control. That control becomes their security blanket. It becomes their shield. It becomes the thing they trust more than any person. This doesn't mean they wake up every morning trying to hurt people. It doesn't mean they are villains. It means they learned somewhere along the way that relying on others felt risky. Vulnerability felt risky. Need felt risky. Depending on someone felt risky. So they developed a strategy. Stay connected, but not too connected. Care, but not too much. Get close, but not close enough to lose control. And that's where the confusion begins. Because to the outside world, they can appear loving, they can be affectionate, they can be attentive, they can say beautiful things, they can even mean those things in the moment. But the second the relationship starts requiring deeper emotional surrender, alarms go off inside them. Suddenly they need space. Suddenly they feel trapped. Suddenly they are uncertain. Suddenly they start questioning the relationship, and the person on the other side is left wondering what changed. Nothing changed overnight. You simply reached the point where intimacy started competing with their need for control. This is why grand gestures often fail with avoidance. People believe that if they prove their love hard enough, long enough, clearly enough, the avoidant person will finally relax. But relationships are not won through evidence. If they were, many avoidants would stay. The problem is not a lack of proof. The problem is the meaning they attach to closeness. Imagine someone who associates emotional dependence with losing freedom. Now imagine you give them more love, more support, more attention. To you, that's generosity. To them, it can feel like the walls are slowly closing in. Again, this doesn't make them bad. It simply explains why effort alone cannot solve the problem. There are people who spent years trying to earn love through self-sacrifice. They became relationship superheroes. They rescued, they fixed, they tolerated, they waited, they forgave, they gave chance after chance after chance. And at the end, they were shocked to discover that none of those things created the secure bond they hoped for. Why? Because they were playing a different game than the other person. They were investing in connection. The avoidant was investing in distance management. One person was asking, how do we get closer? The other person was asking, how do I avoid feeling overwhelmed? Those are two very different missions. And until you understand that, you'll keep personalizing behavior that was never really about you. This is another painful truth. Many avoidants can genuinely appreciate what you do for them. They may be grateful, they may admire you, they may even love aspects of you deeply. But appreciation and emotional availability are not the same thing. Someone can appreciate you and still be unable to meet you where you need them to meet you. Someone can care about you and still run from intimacy. Someone can miss you and still refuse to build a healthy relationship. We often assume feelings automatically create actions. They don't. People act according to what they are most loyal to. And if an avoidant person is most loyal to self-protection, that loyalty will repeatedly outrank the relationship. This is why so many people become exhausted. They spend all their energy trying to become more lovable. They think the issue is their worth. Maybe if I'm more attractive, maybe if I'm more understanding, maybe if I'm less emotional, maybe if I'm easier to be with, maybe then they'll stay. But the tragedy is that many of these people were already enough. Their problem was not a lack of value. Their problem was believing they could outwork another person's emotional limitations. You cannot love someone into readiness. You cannot sacrifice someone into maturity. You cannot convince someone to value connection more than the defenses they cling to. That decision belongs to them. And until they make it, you can spend years pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. At this point, some people ask, so does that mean avoidants never change? No, people can absolutely change. But change happens when awareness meets responsibility. Change happens when someone recognizes the cost of their patterns and decides to do something about them. Change does not happen because another person suffered enough. That distinction is critical. Too many people secretly believe their loyalty will eventually inspire transformation. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't, because transformation requires participation from the person creating the problem. Now, here's something that surprises many people. The moment you stop chasing an avoidant is often the moment they become curious again. Why? Because the pressure disappears, the dynamic shifts, the emotional temperature changes. Suddenly they have room to approach instead of feeling pursued. But this creates another trap. People mistake renewed interest for permanent change. They think finally, everything is different now. Then the cycle repeats. Closeness increases, fear increases, distance returns, hope rises, hope crashes. The emotional roller coaster continues. If you've ever been caught in that cycle, you know how addictive it can become. Every small sign of affection feels enormous because it arrives after periods of absence. Every text feels valuable because you've been deprived of connection. Every moment of closeness feels magical because it seems so hard to obtain. And before you know it, you're no longer evaluating the relationship based on consistency. You're evaluating it based on relief. You're not asking, is this healthy? You're asking, does this feel better than yesterday? That's a dangerous standard because almost any relationship can seem good when compared to emotional starvation. Mid-video check-in. If this message is hitting home, comment I choose me. Subscribe right now. Comment I choose me. Subscribe if you're ready to stop chasing people who keep running. Comment I choose me, and let this be the moment you start valuing yourself again. Here's what many people never realize. The strongest position in any relationship is not the person who cares the least. It's the person who can care deeply without abandoning themselves. That is real power. Real power is not becoming cold. Real power is not playing games. Real power is not pretending you don't care. Real power is maintaining your standards even when your emotions are screaming at you to settle. Avoidants often teach people a painful lesson. They reveal where people are willing to betray their own needs in exchange for the possibility of love. They reveal how much uncertainty someone is willing to tolerate. They reveal how many excuses someone can make for behavior that continuously hurts them. And sometimes the greatest gift hidden inside the experience is the realization that you deserve reciprocity. You deserve consistency. You deserve communication. You deserve someone who does not treat intimacy like a threat. The problem is that many people become so focused on understanding the avoidant that they stop understanding themselves. They analyze every text, every delay, every mood shift, every mixed signal. They become detectives in someone else's emotional world while ignoring their own. But imagine redirecting that energy. Imagine asking different questions. Not why are they pulling away, but why am I chasing someone who keeps pulling away? Not how do I make them choose me, but why am I choosing someone who repeatedly shows me they are unavailable? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they are empowering because they return your attention to the only person you can actually control, yourself. There is another misconception worth discussing. Many people think avoidants are fearless because they appear detached. In reality, detachment is often a response to fear. The fear simply looks different. Some people fear abandonment, others fear engulfment, some fear being left, others fear losing themselves inside a relationship. Both fears can create destructive behavior. The difference is how they show up. One person chases, the other withdraws, one clings, the other escapes. And when these two patterns meet, they often create intense chemistry, not healthy chemistry. Familiar chemistry, predictable chemistry, painful chemistry, the kind of chemistry that keeps people stuck for years because every interaction feels emotionally charged. But intensity is not intimacy, confusion is not connection, anxiety is not love, and unpredictability is not passion. Healthy love often feels calmer than people expect. It feels steadier, more reliable, less dramatic, which is precisely why some people overlook it. They have become addicted to emotional extremes. They mistake uncertainty for excitement. They mistake inconsistency for mystery. They mistake struggle for significance. Yet the relationships that truly last are usually built on something far less glamorous: reliability, trust, emotional safety, mutual effort, accountability. These things may not create fireworks every day, but they create something far more valuable: peace. And peace is underrated until you've spent enough time suffering. If you are currently dealing with an avoidant person, understand this. Your job is not to become more impressive. Your job is not to become more useful. Your job is not to become the perfect partner. Your job is to observe reality, observe patterns, observe consistency, observe actions, because actions reveal priorities. If someone repeatedly chooses distance over connection, believe the pattern. If someone repeatedly avoids difficult conversations, believe the pattern. If someone repeatedly leaves whenever intimacy deepens, believe the pattern. Hope is beautiful, but without evidence becomes self-deception. There comes a point where protecting your future matters more than protecting your fantasy. And that's where real healing begins. Healing begins when you stop negotiating with reality. Healing begins when you stop trying to earn what should be freely given. Healing begins when you stop measuring your worth by another person's capacity. Remember this carefully. An avoidant person's inability to fully receive your love is not proof that your love lacks value. A locked door does not mean the key is worthless. It simply means the door is not opening. Too many people spend years standing in front of locked doors, wondering what's wrong with the key. Nothing is wrong with the key. The question is whether you're willing to spend your life waiting outside. The most attractive thing you can do is not convince someone to choose you. The most attractive thing you can do is choose yourself. Choose your standards, choose your peace, choose your emotional health. Choose relationships that move toward you instead of away from you, because the truth is simple. Avoidants don't primarily organize their lives around your sacrifices. They don't organize their lives around your loyalty. They don't organize their lives around everything you've done for them. They organize their lives around whatever helps them feel emotionally safe. And until they consciously work on that pattern, that loyalty will continue guiding their decisions. The moment you understand this, everything changes. You stop taking every withdrawal personally. You stop treating distance like a challenge to overcome. You stop believing more effort is always the answer. And you start asking the question that matters most. Does this relationship have the capacity to meet my needs? Because love is not just about what you feel. It's about what you experience. It's about whether two people can consistently show up for each other. It's about whether connection grows instead of constantly shrinking. And if someone is loyal above all else to avoiding vulnerability, then no amount of proving, persuading, rescuing, or sacrificing can create the relationship you deserve. The day you truly accept that is the day you stop chasing unavailable people and start building a life where love no longer has to be earned through suffering. And that may be the most important relationship lesson of all. They watched you give everything, your time, your patience, your loyalty, your understanding, and then they left. Not after a fight, not after betrayal, not after you stopped caring. They left while you were still trying. That's the part nobody talks about. Because the most painful thing about loving an avoidant isn't losing them. It's realizing that all the things you thought would make them stay were never the things they were protecting in the first place. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the one loyalty that sits above every promise, every feeling, and every relationship in the avoidant mind. And once you understand it, you'll stop blaming yourself for battles that were never yours to win. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like the harder you loved someone, the further away they became? If you have, comment "Wake Up" below, subscribe to the channel, and keep listening, because what you're about to hear could save you years of confusion. Most people enter relationships believing a simple idea. If I show enough love, love will grow. If I stay loyal, loyalty will be returned. If I support someone through difficult times, they'll value me more deeply. It's a beautiful belief. It's also how many healthy relationships work. But when you're dealing with an avoidant person, the rules often feel completely different. You give more, they retreat. You become more available. They become harder to reach. You move closer. They move further away. And eventually, you find yourself trapped in a question that won't leave your mind. Why doesn't any of this seem to matter? The answer is uncomfortable, because it forces us to see the relationship through a different lens. You thought the relationship was being measured by love. They were measuring something else entirely. Every person has a priority system, a hidden hierarchy, a thing they protect above everything else. For some people, it's connection. For others, it's achievement. For others, it's status. For deeply avoidant people, that priority is often emotional independence, not happiness, not intimacy, not partnership, independence. The feeling that nobody has too much influence over them. The feeling that nobody can trap them emotionally. The feeling that they can always escape if things become too intense. Once you understand that, their behavior starts making more sense. Not because it becomes acceptable, but because it becomes predictable. Suddenly, all those confusing moments begin connecting together. The distancing, the mixed signals, the hot and cold behavior, the emotional walls, the sudden need for space right when things were getting closer. It wasn't random, it wasn't mysterious, it was loyalty. Just not loyalty to the relationship, loyalty to emotional self-protection. They didn't leave when you stopped loving them. They left while you were still giving everything. Think about that. You were answering every call. You were making every effort. You were being patient when nobody else would have been. You were fighting for the relationship when they had already started emotionally walking toward the exit. And that's what makes this so painful. Because if they had left after you gave up, at least it would make sense. But they left while you were still trying. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might completely change the way you see avoidant people forever. By the end of this video, you'll understand why so many people spend years exhausting themselves trying to win a battle that was never designed to be won. Before we go further, I want to ask you one question. Have you ever felt like the more you loved someone, the colder they became? If the answer is yes, comment "Wake Up" below, subscribe to the channel, and listen carefully, because this message may explain years of confusion in a few minutes. One of the most dangerous beliefs people carry into relationships is the belief that effort guarantees results. We are taught that if we work hard enough, care deeply enough, sacrifice enough, and stay loyal enough, eventually things will work out. In many areas of life, that's true. Hard work often creates success. Persistence often creates progress. But relationships don't always follow that rule, especially when the person you're trying to love is deeply avoidant. Because avoidants don't operate according to the rules most people expect. Most people think love creates safety. Many avoidants think safety requires distance. Most people see closeness as comfort. Many avoidants experience too much closeness as pressure. Most people move toward connection when they feel afraid. Avoidants often move away. And that's where the tragedy begins. because two people can be standing in the exact same relationship while experiencing completely different realities. You think you're building something, they think they're losing something. You think intimacy is growing. They think freedom is shrinking. You think you're showing commitment. They think expectations are increasing. And neither person understands why the relationship suddenly feels harder than it did before. This is why so many people become trapped in endless confusion. At first, the avoidant seems invested. They text, they call, they open up, they make plans, they show affection, and for a while, everything feels promising. You begin imagining a future, you begin trusting them, you begin lowering your guard, then something changes. The relationship becomes more serious, the emotional connection becomes deeper, the stakes become higher. And suddenly they start pulling away, not a little. A lot. Sex becomes slower, conversations become shorter, affection becomes inconsistent, excitement becomes uncertainty. The person who once moved toward you now seems determined to create distance. And because you care, you naturally assume something must be wrong. Maybe I need to communicate better. Maybe I need to be more patient. Maybe I need to support them more. Maybe I need to prove that I'm different. Maybe I need to love them harder. That last one destroys more hearts than almost anything else, because when avoidants withdraw, many people respond by increasing their effort. They become more understanding, more available, more forgiving, more accommodating, more willing to sacrifice their own needs. They think they're solving the problem, but often they're feeding it, because the avoidant isn't pulling away due to a lack of love. They're pulling away because the relationship is activating fears they haven't learned to handle. And that's where everything changes. You see, most people assume avoidants are loyal to people. They're not, at least not in the way most people mean. Avoidants are loyal to a feeling of control, a feeling of independence, a feeling of emotional self-sufficiency. That feeling becomes the center of their world. Everything gets evaluated through it. Every relationship, every conflict, every commitment, every vulnerable conversation, every moment of emotional dependence. The question running underneath everything is simple. Will this cost me my freedom? The closer someone gets, the louder that question becomes. That's why your sacrifices often don't have the impact you expect. You think love earns trust, but trust isn't the issue. You think consistency creates security, but security isn't the issue. You think proving yourself will make them relax, but proving yourself isn't the issue. The issue is that no amount of proof can remove a fear someone refuses to confront. Ride that again in your mind. No amount of proof can remove a fear someone refuses to confront. And that realization is painful, because it means the relationship isn't being limited by your effort, it's being limited by their capacity. Many people spend years trying to solve someone else's emotional limitations. Years. Think about that. Years of waiting, years of hoping, years of understanding, years of explaining away behavior that keeps hurting them, years of believing that if they just love a little better, everything will finally click. But relationships don't transform because one person keeps suffering. Relationships transform when both people grow. And that's a distinction many people never learn until their heart is already broken. The reality is that avoidants can appreciate you deeply, they can admire you, respect you, miss you, care about you, even love you in their own way. But appreciation doesn't automatically create emotional availability. Someone can love parts of you and still be incapable of building the relationship you need. Someone can miss you and still choose distance. Someone can care about you and still repeatedly hurt you. Someone can want you and still not be ready for you. That contradiction confuses people because most of us assume that feelings determine behavior. They don't. Priorities determine behavior. And if someone's highest priority is protecting themselves from vulnerability, that priority will often outrank the relationship itself. This is why avoidants can sometimes leave relationships that appear perfectly good from the outside. People look at it and say, what were they thinking? The partner was loving, supportive, committed. Why walk away? Because relationships aren't only about what you gain. They're also about what you fear losing. And avoidants often fear losing control more than they desire connection. That's the hidden battle nobody sees. Imagine being thirsty, but every time you reach for water, you become afraid of drowning. That's what intimacy can feel like for someone who hasn't addressed their avoidance. They want connection, but connection triggers fear. They want love, but love triggers vulnerability. They want closeness, but closeness activates alarms. So they move toward what they want, then away from it, then toward it, then away from it again, creating cycles that leave everyone exhausted, especially the person trying to love them, because the partner becomes trapped inside a moving target. One day they're wanted, the next day they're too much, one day they're appreciated, the next day they're overwhelming, one day the future sounds exciting. The next day commitment feels terrifying. The rules keep changing, the expectations keep shifting. And eventually the partner begins losing touch with themselves. They become obsessed with monitoring every signal, every text, every pause, every mood, every change in energy. They stop asking what they need and start asking what the avoidant needs. They stop evaluating the relationship and start managing it. They stop feeling secure and start feeling responsible. That's where the damage becomes serious. Because now the relationship isn't just hurting, it's reshaping your self-worth. You're no longer asking whether the relationship is healthy. You're asking how much more of yourself you're willing to sacrifice to keep it alive. And that's a dangerous place to be. Because love should never require the destruction of your identity. Yet, many people slowly disappear inside avoidant relationships, not all at once, piece by piece. They stop expressing needs, they stop bringing up concerns, they stop expecting consistency, they stop expecting reciprocity. They stop expecting effort, and eventually they convince themselves that crumbs are enough, that maybe this is just how relationships work, that maybe they're asking for too much. They're not, they're asking the wrong person. And that realization changes everything. Right here, I want you to pause mentally for a second. If any part of this feels familiar, comment "choose me" below. Not because it's a trend, not because it's clever, because it's a reminder. A reminder that your life matters too. Comment "choose me", skudbor, and keep listening, because the next part may be the most important lesson in this entire video. Many people believe the solution is becoming more valuable, more attractive, more successful, more patient, more understanding, more emotionally intelligent, more perfect. But here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You cannot become valuable enough to heal someone who is committed to avoidance. You cannot become attractive enough to eliminate another person's fear. You cannot become patient enough to do their emotional work for them. You cannot become perfect enough to make them ready. Readiness is an inside job. Growth is an inside job. Healing is an inside job. And until someone chooses that work, every relationship will eventually collide with the same wall. This is why so many avoidants repeat patterns: different partner, same cycle. Different relationship, same ending, different promises, same fears, the names change, the circumstances change, the underlying problem remains. Because geography doesn't heal wounds, new relationships don't heal wounds. Time doesn't automatically heal wounds, awareness heals wounds. Responsibility heals wounds. Action heals wounds. Without those things, patterns survive, and patterns are powerful, stronger than promises, stronger than intentions, stronger than chemistry. That's another difficult truth. Chemistry is overrated. Many people stay in painful relationships because the chemistry feels incredible. The highs are unbelievable. The connection feels magnetic. The attraction feels intense. The longing feels addictive. But intensity isn't intimacy. Chaos isn't connection. Anxiety isn't love. And unpredictability isn't passion. Sometimes it's just instability wearing a beautiful disguise. The strongest relationships often feel less dramatic than people expect. Less confusing, less exhausting, less volatile. They don't require constant decoding. You don't spend every night wondering where you stand. You don't spend every weekend questioning your worth. You don't spend every conversation looking for hidden meanings. You know. You know because their actions match their words. You know because consistency replaces confusion. You know, because emotional safety replaces emotional guessing. And safety may not feel exciting at first, but eventually you realize something. Peace is addictive too. Not the addiction of chaos, the addiction of freedom. The freedom of not worrying, the freedom of not chasing, the freedom of not proving, the freedom of not constantly earning your place in someone's life. That's what healthy love feels like. And once you've experienced it, many old dynamics suddenly lose their appeal. Here's something that might surprise you. The moment many people finally stop chasing avoidance is often the moment avoidants become curious again. Suddenly they reach out. Suddenly they seem interested. Suddenly they miss you. Suddenly they remember your value. And people often interpret this as transformation. Be careful. Interest is not the same thing as growth. Missing someone is not the same thing as changing. Wanting connection is not the same thing as sustaining connection. The real question isn't whether they come back. The real question is whether they come back differently. Because if the pattern remains unchanged, the cycle usually repeats. Hope rises, closeness increases, fear returns, distance follows, hearts break, again and again, until someone finally decides enough is enough. That person needs to be you, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself too. That's the lesson many people learn too late. Love for another person should never require hatred toward yourself. It should never require abandoning your standards. It should never require accepting behavior that continuously damages your emotional well-being. And it should never require endless suffering as proof of commitment. If someone only values you after losing access to you, that's not necessarily love. Sometimes it's discomfort, sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's simply the loss of familiarity. Don't confuse someone's reaction to your absence with proof that they can finally provide what you need. Watch actions, not emotions. Watch consistency, not promises. Watch patterns, not potential. Potential has broken more hearts than reality ever could. People fall in love with who someone could become. Meanwhile, reality keeps showing them who that person actually is. And reality deserves your attention, because reality tells the truth. If someone repeatedly withdraws when intimacy deepens, reality is speaking. If someone repeatedly chooses distance over communication, reality is speaking. If someone repeatedly avoids accountability, reality is speaking. Listen not because it's easy, because it's necessary. The strongest thing you can do is accept what is, not what could be, not what should be, not what might happen someday. What is, because that's where freedom begins. And freedom is powerful. The moment you stop trying to save someone from themselves, you get your energy back. The moment you stop chasing unavailable people, you get your confidence back. The moment you stop proving your worth, you remember your worth. And that's when your life changes, not when they finally choose you. When you finally choose yourself, that's the turning point. That's the breakthrough. That's the moment the story shifts. Because the truth is this: avoidants don't primarily organize their decisions around your sacrifices. They don't organize them around your loyalty. They don't organize them around everything you've done. They organize them around whatever protects their sense of emotional safety. And until they consciously challenge that pattern, it remains the strongest force in the room. Stronger than attraction, stronger than chemistry, stronger than good intentions, stronger than promises, stronger than love itself. The moment you understand that, you stop taking their behavior as a measurement of your value. You stop interpreting every withdrawal as a verdict on your worth. You stop carrying responsibility that never belonged to you. And finally, maybe for the first time in a long time, you breathe, you stop running, you stop chasing, you stop convincing, you stop proving, and you realize something extraordinary. The love you've been desperately trying to get from someone else was never supposed to come at the expense of the love you owe yourself. That's the lesson. That's the freedom. And that's why the people who truly heal are not the ones who finally get the avoidant to stay. They're the ones who finally learn they don't need to beg anyone to stay in the first place.